This is Akitami. Welcome back to Sister Radio. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We share an episode every full moon and every new moon. Each episode, I'm joined by a different sister for a conversation where we talk about everything, including art, activism, growing up, work, and of course, reading books written by female authors. If you like what we are doing here, help us reach more people. Please share, rate us, review us, leave us a comment. All these small bits will help us get to places where we can actually make a difference. Alright, let's get into today's episode. I am so happy to be joined today by a young one. Fierce and vocal, Priyanka Paul is just 21 years old. She's a self taught illustrator and poet. Her works mainly revolve around themes of social justice and self exploration and has been featured in publications and galleries all around the world, including The Fader, The Huffington Post, Femina, Vogue, Elle, Vice, yeah, you name it. In her free time, you'll find her jamming to hip hop, thinking of ideas for zines, and fighting Twitter trolls. What a breath of fresh air to see her occupying space online and thriving. Alright, let's get to it. Welcome, sister. How are you?
Hi, Aki. Thank you for having
You're most
me.
welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Just the lockdown has phases of just my brain being completely silent and then having a lot of thoughts altogether that I do not know what to make of. But otherwise, just
Right.
coping.
And where are you sheltered right now?
I'm at home, which is in Bombay.
Mhm.
I've always lived with my parents. I've lived with them my entire
How
life.
is the COVID situation in Bombay?
I think it's spreading like wildfire. I feel like almost everyone I know has a relative who has it at this point. And just hearing the stories about it just makes you feel like I feel like I've really questioned mortality a lot with all of this. And that's definitely something I've questioned over the years as well. Like at a very young age, because my mom been through a bunch of illnesses where she could have died. So having to, worry about the mortality of everyone else around you as well. It's just thinking about just life and death and spirituality and all of that is happening. So that's conflicting. No, I don't even think of it in that way, like in the whole sad and the grief and all of that. I also want to understand how you
Hmm.
process that grief.
Yeah, definitely. We never are really taught to process death. It's also because of colonization. The way we think of
Yeah.
death is like very Western in the sense of like,
Yeah, even the whole graphic idea of death, and its whole
hmm,
fetishization, and especially when it comes to people from marginalized societies and how our deaths are seen, our deaths are portrayed. I think just understanding the violence of it all. Can you take away the violence from death? And I just have so many questions that I do not have answers to, but my brain just constantly keep like because for me when I think about that, I'm just like this was this whole person who had all these thoughts and now they're gone. Where did they go? So I just keep asking myself that, and I also wonder where will I go, or where will anyone go for that matter? And then I also just I'm so concerned about death, and then maybe sometimes we forget to live in all of that, just trying to make sense of that. And in all honesty, we should be trying to make sense of life.
yeah. Well, amongst indigenous people, we have to live good lives in order to in order to become good ancestors, so that we are able to guide our children in the future. So we have to be accountable both in our deaths and in our lives. And that way, it's not like, I'll have all my fun here and then it's goodbye. And
Yeah, and it's not easy, right? I was talking to a friend today about the whole concept of spirituality, and I think for me, like if I were to understand spirituality, it's somehow taking yourself out of social structures, trying to find your place in the world, which you cannot do if you dismiss concepts, no, like real life experiences, valid experiences that are affected due to the caste system, due to just all of this violence, due to Brahminical superiority humanity and all of this, is this ideas of spirituality just come from this whole Western notion, or also just like upper caste notions of the world is just like what are they doing nowadays? They're burning sage and they're keeping rhinestones around, and somehow that is just gonna solve the world. It's such an idealistic idea to just like separate yourself from the world. You can only do that if you have privilege. If you know the truth of the world, I feel like you cannot move into that sphere of spirituality. That just dismisses so much lived experience, and then you're just making up like a fairy tale in your mind which doesn't
Mm.
exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And space also, right? Like you're granted that space to like be by yourself and meditate and do things, whereas like
Literally, literally. How many people can afford to do that? How many people can just be like, okay, the world. I don't care. A lot of people cannot say I don't care because it's literally in your
yeah,
blood to
and also
care.
you have absolutely no space because you are working continuously, so there is no space to think even like about life or death or anything at all. Just to live is so difficult, and yeah, like you correctly said, caste it is major, especially when you think about spirituality.
Definitely. Because it literally, because the caste system ideas of spirituality also just enforce oppression, honestly. Like their ideas of karma, their ideas of twice bonds, all of those just work towards oppressing Dalit Bahujans. I just think feel like at every level you need to question it. Even in what ideas seem like probably you would consider peaceful, they're not essentially peaceful because they're rooted in telling another person that your life is not as worthy as another person. So you know what I mean by when my brain just goes in overdrive and I'm just like, what do I do with these thoughts? What do I say with constantly that? And maybe someday I'll make something out of it. But till then, these are just thoughts that exist in my head.
Yeah, and it's like not just you, like it's the burden that we have been forced to carry for so long. Like it's something that I'm sure your parents have thought about,
Definitely.
your older siblings and cousins must have thought about,
Mm,
because these are things that we encounter every day. Of course, now it has been amplified much more because of COVID. And like I think it is reflected in the
yeah.
way that our people have been looking at religion and then like adopting and leaving that religion and moving to
Mm,
another religion. A lot of our people have adopted Christianity and then they've moved to Islam, then they've moved to Buddhism, all of these different religions just to find acceptance and be reflected in some form of God
At the
figure.
end of the day, it's just about finding sort of acceptance. Like I was reading about modern day mental health doesn't talk about God as much as it should because it's such a huge part of how a lot of masses think about their own mental health. Because if you technically see when people go to pray, they're talking to what they think is talking to God, but it's essentially talking to yourself. And I think in just understanding that, even understanding religions in India, especially religions that are not Hinduism or all the like Christianity, Islam, all of them, and just this way of just separating from the main narrative and trying to build something new. And just like all the violence attached to Hinduism and running away from it. Think how that makes you feel particularly. Because it makes you feel like you're an outsider when you're not.
Yeah, it's such a huge gaslighting scheme because the image of Hinduism is like so pure and clean, and it's attached to yoga
Mm.
and chanting everywhere else in the world. When even when people talk about mental health and the experience that majority of people have in the South Asian region with Hinduism is totally different.
Literally, people do not know that, and also the assumption that everyone over here is Hindu. I feel like it's just completely
Mm.
antithetical to what the idea of India is. If there is like a base idea of what India should have been by like founding fathers, who also are casteist horrible people. So I don't really have hope.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, totally. Like, and also like people who are leading discourses on everything, including mental health. We have to be very observant on who are these people who are talking about mental health.
Mm.
What do they even understand? Like, because they don't even understand the tip of the iceberg when it comes to mental health and caste and mental health and indigeneity. Yeah, especially in the
Literally,
South Asian context, because
they do not.
at
Yeah,
least
yeah.
when it comes to the Western world and in the global
Mm.
north, I think people are taking accountability when it comes to blackness, when it comes to slavery, when it comes to indigeneity.
I think they've at least started that conversation. Here, that conversation does not exist. Like, it exists in such niche circles. Some corner of Twitter, some corner of Instagram will have this conversation, and it's just so limited. It will never reach like mainstream newspapers or the news, or just a conversation where people will have something more to say than just their basic narrative of like, oh yeah, India is a diverse country. It's on paper, or just the idea of India in itself. It needs to be challenged and questioned time and again. This conversation on mental health. You recently saw that actor who died. The conversation was so limited to he died because of nepotism, which I personally do not think can be dissected to just one factor. You know, the understanding of mental health is at such a lower level that they can never understand how marginalization probably affects a person. I know for a fact that I have a therapist who is an upper caste woman, and I find it hard to talk to her about things like this.
Yeah, because they don't understand, because it's not just trauma that is a few hundred years old, it's like thousands
Yeah.
of years old. Like, how do you begin to unpack that as an upper caste woman or an upper caste man? Like, how do you do that? And how do you imagine you have authority over that? It has been my biggest contention when it comes to mental health, because all the facilities, the text, everything is like, if it's not Western, if it's like
Yeah.
written in the Indian subcontinent, it still does not really talk about these aspects. So,
It does such a great injustice because a lot of Indian conversation and discourse take, like, if we're talking about Dalit Bahujan issues, we will take a lot of context from black literature and we will somehow make it seem like the context fits into us when it doesn't. And I feel like that does an injustice to both Dalit Bahujan studies and to black African studies. This is not to say that literature doesn't exist, because it's just never given that kind of attention, given that kind of exposure. Someone asked me that they were like, hey, can you suggest an illustrator or a designer for something? And they were like, it would be nice if they were Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi. And I was like, you know what? When you ask me for illustrators, obviously I will have a bunch of names. Think about like designer. I couldn't really think of a lot of names. So I put out a post which was like, hey, are you a Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi, indigenous artist? Please send me your profile and I'd love to pitch you ever, like, if ever an opportunity arises. And I got so little names.
I am an indigenous artist. Pitch me.
I know. I have sent your name. No, but they also ask for designers, like graphic designers who do like that very typical design work, which I don't do. I don't know how. I was just thinking about
Mm.
how there are obviously designers who are Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi, but also they might not identify with that language, because a lot of people might not want to be called Bahujan unless you're in this space where you are talking about anti-caste, right? Or talking about the anti-caste movement. You are more likely to suppress that part of your identity. Just not talk about it.
Yeah, it's also like palatable to them,
Yeah.
right? Because most of these discourses happen amongst people who are not one of us. Like, it is highly uncomfortable to be the
Yeah.
only person who represents everyone. So, like, all of the questions come to you, and like, you have
Mhm.
to constantly keep playing that role of educating people. It's a lot.
I literally have on my Instagram bio, it says token representation. Every once a year, all the big magazines, all the Vogues and the Els and the Cosmos will have one like body diversity issue. Then they never pay for things like this. They'll want that one fat girl, or they just want like one activist type on their photo shoots, and then they'll call you, and that's about it. That's the only time they care about diversity, when it works for them. I'm clearly participating in a system that I do not very much like. For example, that every time I come up on a magazine, I feel a lot of personal guilt about how everything I stand up for stands against these magazines. Yet a voice in my head says, 10 years before this, a girl who looked like you would never be on these magazines. Some 15-year-old is looking at you there and is like, okay, if she can be there, I can be there. Does that matter to you? So I'm just trying to please a lot of people in my head, and a lot of like, this is where I'm constantly analyzing how I work with my identity, my presence, my what the things I stand for. It's just like a constant having to try to balance things in my mind to make how I act like a rational thing to do. The whole capitalist system perfectly like complements the caste system. This system is made to make you fail. Yet when in the very few rare times it does give you an opportunity, are you supposed to take it, or are you supposed to not take it because you're against it? Is then a constant question in my brain, which I'm sure you also would probably have.
Yeah, it's quite a tricky line to walk, I think. Like,
Mm, I feel like we've spoken about this in terms of
hmm,
zines also.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know where the zine culture is going seriously in this country. It's getting so much co-opted every day. It's scary how expensive
Yeah.
zines are have become now. Wait, I'm going to ask you about your growing up years. Where did you grow up? How was growing up?
So when I say that I live in Bombay, I actually live in Navi Mumbai and I've lived in Navi Mumbai my entire life. I live in this place called Vashi. So this is like suburb also. It's not even counted as Mumbai. It's another town. I went to school. It was a Catholic school. I didn't like it at all. I super detested it because for a lot of part of my growing years, which is like 7 to 10th grade, I was sexually assaulted in school, and that left a huge mark on me, which took a long time to process and like deal with and just like figure out my own self. And I was just convinced that life was to get better after it, and it did. I went to Xavier's in 11th and 12th standard then, so that's when I started drawing, and I only did it. I always drew as a child, but I wasn't like too into it. I wouldn't ever thought I'd be an actual artist because my mother, I remember ever bringing up being an artist, and my mother would be like, "You want to sit outside Jahangir Art Gallery and draw on the road?" Funny now because even my sister's in art school. But anyway, then 11th, 12th happened. In 12th standard, my mother had a brain stroke. She was in the ICU for a month during my 12th board exams, and I gave those exams with the fear that when I came out, she'd probably not be alive. She made it through because she's a warrior. She's incredibly strong, but she's been paralyzed now for 4 years. That took a huge toll on me. That changed a lot for me. But that was also around the time I started digitally illustrating, and because of what was happening in my life, I spent a lot of time just drawing because that was the only thing that could take my mind off. So I drew and I drew and I kept getting better at it. And then I went to Xavier's again for degree college. That's been it.
Yeah, and then your work got a lot of attention
Yeah, I
from.
was 17 when I made the Goddess series, which went viral on the internet when a lot of big publications picked it up and a lot of attention came my way. That was incredibly amazing, like having that kind of attention at a young age. But also it made me feel like, wow, is anything I'm ever gonna make again gonna be as worthwhile? And technically, nothing ever went that viral as much, but I definitely kept getting better with every piece I've made, and and I also dabble in a bunch of other things also. I've been a poet before I started drawing, so I mix my work with my poetry. I think a lot of internet art has to do with eye candy kind of stuff, and I feel like I need to talk more about. I was talking about women in a larger context. I wasn't talking about it about from where I was coming from, so I just started telling my own stories through my art. Then my work
Mm,
had much more meaning to me then, and I think that is where I am at now. Yeah.
right. And I think, like, over the years, as your work has evolved and you have grown, you have started embracing more parts of yourself and tried to, like, bring forth those ideas also. And
Yeah.
then it's not
Mhm.
as palatable to people. So that could be another reason.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
definitely not.
Like, if you're wondering
Definitely.
why your works are not
Mhm.
going as viral as the Goddess series went.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And this is such a clear, like you can see this on the internet. The moment you say something that's very, very basic to understand, which but every time I talk about cars, I can see people unfollowing me. Even though my favorite piece of work to date is a piece I wrote personally about cars called From the Margins. And that piece has like not that many likes. So like it didn't go anywhere.
Especially now, when you're bombed with so many ideas and you're steered to think in one way or the other. I think it's important to take a stand and reflect on, wait, why am I posting this? Like, what does this really mean?
Yeah, I constantly ask myself with like everything I do. It takes a toll also.
Because you are popular online, and I'm sure you get a lot of hate and toxicity pouring into you because just existing as a Bahujan woman.
Yeah.
And in that, you're also.
And also existing as like a very loud Bahujan woman, like a loud, fat, dark Bahujan woman who, a lot of people might not want to agree that they outrightly do not like me, but I know they don't.
Yeah. So, like, how do you handle it? Like, having been in that space where you get all this hate, how do you keep yourself
I have
sane?
really good friends. I have really supportive friends. I have parents who are non meddling in the sense that they will not add to the burden of the hatred that exists on the internet. I go to therapy, obviously, and I feel like our notions of ourselves need to be so strong that no one else can challenge them for us. No one else can come tell me who I am. So these haters don't matter. And the internet is so obvious in its lack of solidarity. It's only like some people's abuse is valid. Your abuse is not. Maybe you were born for it. And that just leads to so much internalization of that, because no one ever stands up for you. So you don't know that you're supposed to stand up for
Even
yourself.
for people like the abusers, the trolls, they have sense of awareness that we do not have solidarity, so they will attack us more. These things are hard to explain to people,
I
like
feel like I've tried explaining this to like an upper caste person or an upper caste friend, and somehow they just do not understand it. And it just makes me think about how, why is it for some people empathy has to be an experience that they have lived, and only then can they understand. I do my best in like talking about things on the internet and with my work, but I know that's not really changing anyone. Only people who look at my art are rich kids in their houses who live in echo bubbles, who want to be told that what they're thinking is right and that they're greater for the way they think. That's the only people who my art is reaching at this point. I would love for it to reach other people. I know that it doesn't. So I don't live in a bubble where I believe I'm doing any major extensive change. I'm doing my best, but I think it can be better. Feel like I will live my life and die without having seen any much change. I strongly want to not believe in
the
that.
idea of change in itself, no, like people think that change is this like huge thing. I think like we have to rethink these ideas. Small things are change also, like very small
Yeah,
steps are change. It does not have to reflect on the outside, like even if it happens in word, and if it's just happening around your family, that's enough also. Like the fact that your sister
I know.
can go to an
Yeah,
art school
yeah.
now and your mom has
Mhm.
accepted art as a
Yeah.
professional choice, that is major.
Yeah, and I think also when I think of this is one part of my brain saying this, that you're not really doing anything, which is probably just my imposter syndrome also talking. But also sometimes there are people who have genuinely changed how they think. People will message me and tell me, hey, this helped me. I've been thinking in a different way about this, trying to understand it. And I think that it's in those small things as well that there is hope or something.
Course, they want that disposable knowledge so that they can put it proper
Yeah.
academic language or turn it into some kind of poetry or art form and then present it themselves and profit from it. People who come and talk to me and then they literally use my words and then make something out of it. So be careful of that as well. It's hard. You somehow just occupy this space of being like the knowledge provider.
They think you owe it to them because you are, for some of us, knowing about our marginalization is not an option we get to have. Like, other people will be like, educate me. I didn't educate myself about this. I
Right.
lived with
And
it.
it's so convenient for them to come and say, educate me. And then we have to spend our time and resources. And
Yeah.
when we want to get educated and we want to go to universities, we have to pay these huge sums of money and still be called like reservation people.
Like today, I was thinking about how I was made to feel like in a classroom that I didn't deserve to be there so many times, because this is again, I was in degree college when I had started getting famous. So I have literally been to people, looked at people in the eye and been like, say to my face that you think I don't deserve to be here. And obviously, these people could not say that to me. But the point is, you didn't have to be anywhere in life to be deserving of that seat. What does that even mean? Like, the added pressure of being in a flawed education system is not enough. You also have to constantly deal with this disrespect and just like the amount of pressure it puts on your self esteem. And the people will literally debate your existence in the classroom. Teachers itself will come and be like, reservation is bad. It's so
It
hurtful.
has to start from a place where they consider us human beings. No, we are just reservation people for them. Everything is blamed on reservation. Like every discourse on social media is like,
Exactly why it's so shallow, right? Like the Savarnas refuse to even look into a little bit of their shit without bringing up reservation.
isn't it bizarre that people are talking about nepotism without talking about caste and how they get through everything because of their caste reservation by the virtue of being
Hilarious. Literally, casteism is
exactly no.
nepotism. It's a kind of if it's nepotism only, and I don't know how people can't see that, and it's just hilarious. And I saw a lot of posters which was like, "Oh, Sushant is what happens when reservation happens."
I saw a post that said India cannot produce COVID vaccine because the doctors came from reservation seats.
Literally, the most smartest man that came out from this country, Dr. Ambedkar, was a Dalit man. And then these people will talk about these things like, oh, like meaning reservation people are just not smart only. It's just the given idea that none of us are smart. None of us, not one.
Yeah, but why is this assumption that all of us came via reserved seats? Like, what is this bizarre assumption? I don't understand.
Like,
Like,
we don't understand that if you get good marks also, we were doing you a favor by getting in through a reserved seat.
gosh, seriously. nobody even talks about these things, because like you get totally blacklisted if you're talking about these things. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. The way the people will come at you, they will feel very entitled in their opinion when they come at you for saying something like this. They will be like, "How can you say you are discriminating?" Like literally on my Twitter. So I got verified whatever when I was like 19 or whatever, and every time I'd get trolled, the trolls would just be like, "Isko blue tick क्यों दिया है?
translated as, why was she given a blue tick?
She's so ugly." Or so the blue tick is some sort of like merit system that only some people can get it or something.
Really, like show me Bahujan, Adivasi, Indigenous, Dalit women who are celebrated.
When I think about it, I'm trying to think of another just like Bahujan OBC woman that I could look up to, and I couldn't. And I come from Kerala, so I'm trying to talk about all of the caste history from Kerala. And the only person who spoke about caste history from Kerala is Arundhati Roy, who did it in a very fetishized way, which I don't feel myself represented in. Realize it just hit me with such strength, like wow, this like ooh.
Because of the race to be in spaces where we are surrounded by savarnas, because those spaces define success in the most general terms, we lose out on our community and our sisterhood, having people around us who we do not have to explain in great detail.
And I hate being the only like Bahujan OBC kind of famous young person. So even that is just disturbing to me in just understanding then how I feel so alone in this. And my constant life struggle has just been trying to literally infiltrate circles where full of savarna, to get to some sort of social relevance. And then again, I also don't blame other Bahujans or other people from my marginalized communities who become into these Brahmanized versions because it's literally about survival. Because you will literally be shunned away if you're just like vocal about your identity, which isn't a Brahmin identity.
Yeah, I am a little bit critical about that because like there is a difference between survival and like getting celebrated,
Mm.
and because I know a lot of people who have reached a certain place in their life who
Right.
never contribute, never look at what's happening in the grassroots, and there's plenty of things to do,
Yeah, no, definitely. I
like,
completely agree with you on that.
yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
how you can
so
turn a blind eye to that.
I think
Yeah. Mm.
definitely, I think we have to look at our ancestors, like people before us who have been like exceedingly successful, but also like centered the community in everything that they did. We have Fulan Devi, we have Savitri Bai. They never moved away from
I
community.
completely understand what you mean. And that's exactly where I take inspiration from, like Savitri Bai and how of just understanding how she worked and how her life has shaped up so much of our life. So anyway, obviously that's just and like personally again I have to like review myself, the choices I make, the things I'm standing up for, does that fit into that? So yeah, this is definitely a question that has existed, but for me, I've always tried to like one part of my brain definitely also does say that you can use this because then you can talk about the more important things that you want to talk about only when people take notice of you, because otherwise then if you're not being celebrated you're being looked down upon and then no one wants to hear you. And it's a whole race that already disadvantages us. And I'm going to say like even after all of this, like okay, you got picked up by one of the biggest brands in the world, and in the same Indian society you will not be given that kind of respect in the art world. I know for a fact that as a content creator also as an artist, I know a lot of other artists who are paid more, given just their work is just celebrated a lot more than mine is, even though my work might personally to me be better than their work. And it's just so obvious. It's just so obvious the way just the whole world is just modeled around benefiting just one kind of people, and that doesn't happen to be me or you.
With Gucci, it was like they approached me because they wanted to make a short film, like a series of short documentaries on my practice. And
Yeah, I saw it was beautiful and I loved
yeah,
all of them.
thank you. It's so sweet that you noticed because I was so awkward. I had like
No, you look so great in all of them. They should just let you keep. Did they let
no,
you
of
keep the
course not. They
clothes?
did not let me keep any. But it's interesting to see a global brand wanting to
Oh my
make a documentary film
god.
on me. You like
Exactly.
really like
Exactly.
nobody has ever heard about another Thangmi woman. Like literally, we are one of the endangered tribes of the
Right.
world. So
Right.
you can imagine how important this documentary series is.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So, like,
Yeah.
not just for my work, but just to say that we exist as people and like we are indigenous to this space,
Mhm.
and this is my practice, and this is how I think. Because what we are surrounded by
Mhm.
is like thoughts of oppressors, basically, who teach us how to be oppressors. And if we don't participate in
Yeah.
that race of being oppressors, then we are left out. So yeah, they don't
Literally.
really see value
Yeah.
in us, and this is something that I've experienced a lot when it comes to my practice. Like the way my work is celebrated outside of India is very different when it comes to how the Indian art world views me and my practice. So some, like, I don't like to spend a lot of time in India. Like I get very bogged down because I'm like constantly beaten down, constantly made to feel small in spaces.
I can't only. I very often want to run away from this country. Maybe I will. A huge part of me does not want to because I believe I want to do something. I have a lot of aims in life. I want to help people. I want to do more things. I want to have more conversations. I want to do what you've been doing. Creating spaces, creating actual spaces where people can come together and actually have something happen on ground. It's just scary to see how just your life is, how little it's valued, how little your voice is valued, and how much you have to cling to that voice that's coming out of yourself. Because so often you're told not to have that voice. It might sound like a very first world problem to have, but I think a lot of people like talking to me because of who I am on the internet. Associating with me is good for whoever you are. I find myself often very confused in navigating friendships nowadays because I can't tell if people want to be friends with Art Horing or they want to be friends with Priyanka. Sounds like such a high school concept. Like I really didn't think people acted this way outside high school, but they clearly do.
The high school space has been looked down upon by a lot of people, thinking that the world is different, but honestly, the world is a giant high school.
It's a giant high school. It just keeps, in different ways, this just keeps repeating. And you just sometimes wonder that I thought adulthood was going to be different, but it really is not.
I was also thinking that you would be the right person to talk about this. In online spaces, I often come up across, I don't know if I'm the only person who sees this, but it's like really talking down upon like people who work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and people who can't speak in English. So I'm just like, how is this funny? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why does this video have 30,000 likes? I don't get
Oh,
it.
yeah, I've come across that a bunch of times where you center your own experience. You feel like how you view the world is the most important way of viewing the world. So you will talk in a bad accent to mimic your parlor lady or mimic your maid. They keep doing that. That's the thing, right? They don't consider them human. Aki, as you said, they don't consider them human. This is so ingrained into the caste system. Occupation is the base of the mockery.
Just so uncomfortable. Not just this is just an example of what is out there in social media, and it's such an unsafe space for us to exist. Anyway, that is the reason why we need people like you who are popular, so that you pop up more in our feed and brighten our day.
I hope other people are also looking at it like that. Or you're right. We definitely know more people. More people talk about their different stories, which are not like the same Sharma ji ki beti narratives. Because I'm bored of them.
Talking about Beti, tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah. So I'm Christian on my dad's side, and I'm Hindu on my mom's side. So my mom comes from the Thia Erava community in Kerala, which is now classified as an OBC caste, but untouchability was practiced
Mm.
against them. And this is the have you heard of the story of
Yeah, the
Nangeli?
breast tax.
The woman, yeah, the breast tax, and she cut off her breast. So she's from the same community. So I've spoken about this a lot. I've spoken about um
Speak
yeah,
about it. Tell us more.
so what happened was that there was this thing called Mulla Karam is the tax, was the breast tax. Brahmin Kshatriya women were allowed to cover their breasts, and lower caste women were supposed to not cover their breasts. And in the event that they do, they had to pay a tax for that. So Nangili cut off her breasts in protest, bled and died, obviously. So yeah, so my mother's side comes from there, and on my mother's side, my great great grandfather, his name is C. Mithawadi Krishnan, and he's a lawyer, banker. So he brought Neo Buddhism to Kerala and started the first Buddhist monastery in Calicut, and he was against Gandhi. So my great grandfather was an anti-caste leader, and he broke into temples and he started the first bank in Kerala. So I come from that legacy, so I feel like it's imperative for me to talk about that. But from my dad's side, I'm Christian. I do not know of his history because he doesn't like talking about it. Caste dynamics of it within how it integrates into it permeates into religions like Christianity and Islam in India, where caste is everywhere. And the whole history of Christianity in India, I feel, is very confounded. Like a lot of people think that a lot of Christians are Christians only because of the British, which is not true. That there's a whole lot of Christian history that existed before the British came to India.
About Kerala Christians. I think it's Kerala Christians. I might be wrong, but it's definitely South Indian Christians. Sujata Gidla's book, Ants Among Elephants. Have you read it? Oh, wait, I think she's Telugu, but she definitely talks about the Kerala Catholic. Anyway, read that book. You might like it. Okay, so do you have any advice for young people, young Bahujan people, young Bahujan women who want to pursue the path that you have taken?
Because the stories we want to tell aren't stories people know how to read. You will feel like you don't have to tell those stories, but I feel like you really should. That's your story, and no one else knows it as better as much as you do, or knows to tell it as well as you do. And so, definitely be telling your story. Secondly, make network, get into networks, and hold your ground. People will often try to convince you that you don't deserve or you don't belong to some place, but only you decide that for yourself. Thirdly, find people like you because they will understand you and they will build you up and you will build them up. And that will sometimes be the most meaningful thing that
Hmm.
exists in the world out there.
Brilliant!
Yeah.
Such great advice. Do you have any suggestions of books that are written by women that you would like to recommend to our
I
listeners?
read so many zines actually. Read every Bombay underground thing that has ever been book. Oh my god, can I say this really controversial that I think you would also agree with? Is to read Scum Manifesto. I love it so much. I think she's a genius.
Are there any organizations working on COVID that you'd like to give a shout out
Okay, yeah.
to?
If you're listening to this, I put up a link on. It's on my Instagram and it's on a Twitter. I made artworks for it. So you want like high res files of it, and if you donate to, I put up a bunch of like 15 to 20 queer relief organizations that are working towards COVID relief for a lot of mostly trans people.
Hmm.
And if you were to donate to any of them, anything about like 500 rupees and send me a receipt, I'd love to send you like high res files of this illustration I
Cute.
made for Pride.
The last question, which I ask everyone:
How one can be a
how can
sister
one
support.
be a sister supporter?
I think sharing the space that we have, I think being kind most of all, I think being kind is the most important. Kindness is the most important thing for all to be a good sister. I think having the ability to consider another person as your own and be able to have like a ear open for them or a shoulder for them to cry on or just lifting each other up because we're constantly in this competition in this world no matter where it is, and I feel like just knowing and
Hmm.
also making another person feel like they're not
Great,
alone
brilliant
is important.
advice again. We are we are done.
Thanks.
Yay. Great. This was such nice conversation, Priyanka. Thank you for joining me.
It was so much fun. I'm so glad I could talk about all of these
No,
things.
yeah, you're always welcome. And seeing you, it's so delightful. I always like having you around, and I want you to join me in everything that I'm doing. And I'm always inviting you because you're such
Thank
a
you.
joy to have.
And I love being in
And
any space with you. You're the reason I love zines. You're the reason I make zines. Thank you. Thank you for that and for
oh,
just all that you do. And you,
oh,
you do a
thank
lot.
you for your work as well. And just existing and being this light in the world. Fun, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Aki. You're so kind. Thank you.
I love you.
Love you too.
Thank you for joining us for episode 4 of Sister Radio. You just heard a conversation between me, Akitami, and Priyanka Paul. If you'd like to check out her work, you can follow her on Twitter and Instagram. Her handle is at ARTWHORING. If you'd like to support Sister Library, you can check out our crowdfunder. The link is in the show notes. You can email us at ilovereadingwomen@gmail.com. Our Instagram is sister.library and our Twitter is Sister Library. Music for Sister Radio is composed by Shasha Patel. Until next time, keep celebrating women.